He had never imagined that one wrong turn in a hotel corridor could change his entire life. Alexander Grant, a man whose name was whispered in corporate boardrooms and splashed across financial magazines, was not someone who believed in fate. For him, life had always been about logic, planning, and execution. Yet that evening, after stepping into what he thought was a private lounge restroom, his world came crashing into an unexpected reality. The door clicked shut behind him, the marble floors gleamed under soft lights, and then he froze. Because in that silence, he heard it, a muffled sob, fragile and broken, echoing against the tiled walls. And when his eyes followed the sound, he saw her, a young woman sitting on the cold floor beside the sink, her face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling as though carrying the weight of the world. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the idea that one small moment can change everything, then don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel Stories Collection. Your support helps us keep bringing life-changing stories to light. Alexander had walked into hundreds of places with polished confidence, but this time, he was caught completely off guard. The young woman did not notice him at first. She was too lost in her own storm, whispering words only she could hear, pleas that sounded like prayers, fragments of despair about being a burden, about not belonging anywhere. Her voice cracked as she spoke, each word a dagger of hopelessness. For a man who had everything, a penthouse with glass walls overlooking the city, fleets of cars, entire companies under his name, he suddenly felt utterly powerless, watching this stranger unravel in the shadows of a place he should not have entered. Alexander wanted to retreat, to give her privacy, but something inside him would not let him walk away. He knew pain when he saw it. Years ago, long before the billion-dollar deals and the endless interviews, he too had been a young man with trembling hands, watching his family fall apart after his father's death. He had buried those memories under ambition, but now, seeing her on the floor, all those buried scars returned like an old wound opening. Slowly, he stepped forward, unsure if his presence would startle her. The sound of his shoes against the marble finally caught her attention. She lifted her head, and in that instant, their worlds collided. Her eyes were swollen from tears, her face pale with exhaustion. She looked barely 20, maybe younger, and yet her gaze carried the exhaustion of someone who had fought battles no one else could see. She tried to wipe her cheeks quickly, embarrassed to be found like this, but the streaks of mascara betrayed her. She whispered an apology for being there, as if her suffering was an inconvenience, as if her very existence required permission. That broke something inside Alexander. He didn't know why, but he stayed, lowering himself to her level on the floor. For once, the powerful CEO wasn't sitting on leather chairs in skyscraper offices. He was crouched on cold tiles beside a girl who seemed invisible to the world. Over the next few minutes, through halting words and shaking breaths, her story unfolded. Her name was Emily. She had grown up in foster care, shuffled from one home to another, never truly belonging anywhere. She had been working 3 jobs to put herself through nursing school, but a series of unfortunate events had left her penniless and homeless. Just hours before, she had been dismissed from her last job after fainting from exhaustion, and when she begged for a chance to stay, her manager had laughed and told her to go cry somewhere else. And so she did. She ended up here, in this restroom, because she had nowhere else to go. Alexander listened silently, every word etching itself deep into his conscience. He realized how blind he had been to the struggles of those outside his circle of wealth and power. He had always written checks to charities, posed for photographs with smiles, but sitting there, he understood that compassion was more than money. It was presence, it was seeing people, it was listening without judgment. Emily had nothing left to hold on to, but still, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that humbled him. What began as a wrong turn soon turned into something far greater. Over the weeks that followed, Alexander couldn't get Emily's broken voice out of his mind. He found himself seeking her out, offering her small but life-changing opportunities. First, a safe place to stay. Then, financial support for her studies. At first, she resisted, afraid of being a charity case, but slowly she realized his intentions came not from pity, but from genuine care. He became a silent anchor in her storm, and in turn, Emily taught him lessons no boardroom could ever provide. She showed him resilience, gratitude, and the strength of someone who has nothing yet still dreams of giving back. Their bond grew quietly, away from flashing cameras or corporate headlines. Alexander began to see the world not in numbers and profits, but in faces and stories. Emily's journey to rebuild herself was not easy. There were setbacks, days of self-doubt, nights when she felt undeserving of any kindness. But Alexander was there, not as a savior, but as a companion who refused to let her fall alone. And slowly, she began to rise. She completed her nursing degree, standing tall in her graduation gown, with Alexander in the crowd clapping the loudest. Years later, when Emily walked through the corridors of a children's hospital where she now worked, her smile radiant as she comforted sick children, Alexander knew that one wrong restroom had led him to the right purpose. The CEO who once measured his worth in profits now measured it in lives touched. Emily never stopped thanking him, but he always told her that it was she who gave his life meaning again. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Your support allows us to keep sharing stories of kindness, second chances, and the power of unexpected moments that change lives forever. And before we end, here's a special request. Leave a comment below telling us if you believe that even the smallest wrong turn in life can lead us to exactly where we are meant to be. The night had been ordinary in every way, until one wrong turn sent him spiraling into a reality he could never have imagined. Alexander Grant, the man whose very name made investors lean forward in attention, whose signature could build or collapse entire industries, was used to control. His life was a finely tuned orchestra, every note carefully planned. But in that moment, as he pushed open the heavy wooden door in a luxury hotel, expecting the calm of the executive lounge restroom, he stumbled into a scene that made his breath hitch and his heart pound against his ribs. The air was quiet except for the low hum of lights, but then it came, the raw, unrestrained sound of someone breaking apart. Not a polite cry hidden behind tissues, but gut-wrenching sobs that carried the ache of years. His first instinct was confusion. What was someone doing here? But confusion quickly gave way to something deeper, something he couldn't name. He stood frozen, as though rooted to the polished marble floor, eyes scanning until they landed on her. She was huddled against the far wall beside the sinks, knees drawn to her chest, hands covering her face. Her hair was unkempt, clothes wrinkled, and her small frame shook as though the world had been too cruel for too long. A million thoughts darted across his mind, but none could explain why this moment felt different, why his chest tightened with an ache he had not felt in years. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the power of unexpected encounters that change lives, then don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Stories Collection. Together, we can keep spreading stories that remind us of the beauty and hope hidden in life's most surprising moments. Alexander considered stepping back, leaving her to her privacy. But something inside refused to let him walk away. He had known struggle, though most of the world had forgotten. They saw the tailored suits, the glass office that pierced the skyline, the fleet of black cars waiting outside. They didn't see the boy he once was, the boy who lost his father in a tragic accident, the boy who watched his mother work herself sick just to put food on the table. Pain was not foreign to him, but he had buried it beneath layers of success, pretending it no longer lived in him. And now, here it was, resurrected in the broken cries of a stranger. The girl lifted her face when she sensed him. Her eyes, swollen from hours of tears, widened in embarrassment. She wiped at her cheeks furiously, whispering an apology, as if existing in pain required permission. Alexander's throat tightened. There was something in the way she looked at him, something that screamed of exhaustion, of battles no one had cared enough to witness. She looked young, far too young to be carrying such a burden. Her name, as he would learn later, was Emily. Her life had been a storm from the very beginning. Passed from one foster home to another, she had never truly belonged anywhere. She had dreamed of becoming a nurse, not for wealth or prestige, but because she wanted to heal others the way no one had ever healed her. To reach that dream, she worked tirelessly, waiting tables, stocking shelves at night, cleaning offices before dawn. Yet no matter how hard she fought, life always seemed to shove her 2 steps back for every one she took forward. Earlier that day, exhaustion had finally betrayed her. While working a shift at a cafe, her legs gave out, and she collapsed in front of customers. Instead of compassion, she was handed a termination slip. Unreliable, they called her. Hours later, with no home to return to, no paycheck to collect, and nothing left but the coins in her pocket, she wandered into the hotel seeking warmth, slipping unnoticed into the restroom that became her sanctuary of despair. Alexander listened as fragments of this story spilled from her lips, her voice breaking under the weight of it. He said nothing, not because he had no words, but because he understood that sometimes silence was the greatest kindness, being a presence, not a solution. He sat down beside her, the cold tiles pressing into his suit, and for once in his life, he didn't care about appearances. That night marked a shift he never anticipated. In the days that followed, Emily's image refused to leave his mind. For a man who dealt in million-dollar contracts and stock market strategies, it startled him how powerless he had felt in that restroom. And yet, that very powerlessness made him want to act, not as a CEO, but as a human being. The next time he saw her, she was sitting outside a shelter, thin jacket wrapped tightly around her shoulders, staring at the ground as though searching for answers in the cracks of the pavement. He approached her cautiously, offering her a hot drink. She hesitated, suspicion flashing across her eyes. Life had taught her that kindness often came with a price. But Alexander's persistence was quiet and steady. He didn't overwhelm her with promises or money. Instead, he offered something far rarer: consistency. He showed up. At first, she resisted. Accepting help felt like admitting weakness, and Emily had survived too long on her own pride to let it go easily. But slowly, through small gestures, a safe place to stay, meals shared in silence, encouragement whispered without expectation, she began to let her guard down. Her healing wasn't linear. There were days she lashed out, certain that he would tire of her and leave like everyone else had. Nights she cried silently, convinced that nothing good could last. Yet Alexander remained, not as her savior, but as her anchor. And in return, Emily unknowingly began to heal something inside him too, the boy who had once grieved in silence, who had built walls of steel around his heart. What followed over the next months was not a fairy tale, but a journey. Emily struggled to trust herself again, to believe that she was worthy of kindness. Alexander struggled to redefine his own success, realizing that all the wealth in the world meant nothing if he ignored the people right in front of him. Their lives intertwined like two broken pieces that somehow fit, each giving the other what they didn't even know they lacked. By the time Emily walked across the stage in her nursing graduation gown, Alexander knew the wrong restroom had led him exactly where he was meant to be. The proudest moment of his life wasn't ringing the bell on Wall Street or signing billion-dollar deals. It was standing in the crowd, clapping through tears as the girl he had once found crying on a cold bathroom floor rose into her destiny.